Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and I am calling it. I am calling the top of Donald Trump and United States global political risk and uncertainty. I think we have gone past the tipping point. It's been a very significant focus over the last year and a half, and unsurprisingly, when the leader of the most powerful country in the world is strongly interested in a more transactional, unilateral policy and desperately wants to undo checks and balances on his power, both at home in the United States and also internationally in relationships with allies and adversaries, then that is going to drive an inordinate amount of global uncertainty, of global risk. And we've seen that play out over the last year and a half. First, on the economic front, Liberation Day, with the United States putting higher tariffs on countries around the world and even some places that weren't countries, most specifically on China, a big fight between the world's two largest economies, two most powerful countries, the Americans effectively putting a boycott on the Chinese and then backing down. And backing down on China specifically because the Chinese hit back hard, but also because it was unpopular, also because of the market response, the economic response at home, and then over time responses from other countries around the world, judicial responses, Supreme Court response, limiting the ability of Trump to single-handedly upend the global trade environment. We've seen very similar turn of events on Iran. The United States with Israel, but it certainly wouldn't have happened without the Americans, engaging in decapitation strikes, a war of choice against the Islamic Republic, led to a massive impact on global markets, the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, and once again, the Americans backing down because of the impact of a much smaller, less powerful country in being able to really undermine America's ability to protect its allies in the region, defend its own bases in the region, and most importantly, most impactfully, impact the global economy and prices at home and around the world. And so that led to the Americans accepting a much more advantageous deal for the Iranians than would have been anticipated, would have been negotiated for before the war had started, and also shows the limits of President Trump's ability and America's ability to subvert the existing global order. For good, for bad, irrespective, the point is it's a change that leads to global risk, and that change has been seen to be constrained. If the Americans had continued with its boycott on the Chinese, or expanded in terms of more export controls, if the Americans had continued taking the 15,000 troops that had been sent to the region to a ground war, taking the oil, taking Karg Island, destroying the Iranian civilization, and Trump had repeatedly threatened to do, then we'd be in a very different situation. We'd be in a global recession or worse, and I wouldn't be making this call today. But in both cases, that wasn't true, and it's not true specifically because Trump's ability to continue to double down on threats against actors that are able to hit back and double down with an environment domestically where there are real and hard constraints on him, that is limited. And going forward, just as we've seen internationally now with the Italian Prime Minister Meloni hitting Trump back, even though she's been one of his biggest supporters and friends and conduits in Europe, the only European leader that actually attended Trump's second inauguration in Washington, D.C., instead saying, you're mistreating us and we're not going to stand for it, and that being more popular at home. I was in Vienna last week, heard the same thing from the Austrian president there. We're seeing that from leaders across the board, more privately than publicly, but still, as we move towards the midterm elections, which Trump is going to lose and becomes increasingly a lame duck president, and people start thinking about life after Trump, either Republican or Democrat, you're going to see more international figures that will say publicly what heretofore they've been saying privately. That'll even be true with Republicans in the House and Senate. Yes, they'll be the last to shift. You see Senator Cassidy now saying that the Iranians have fought the superpower U.S. to a draw. He never would have said that if Trump hadn't knifed him in his own primary run to be able to serve again as Senate. But you are starting to see other Republican leaders recognize that there's going to be life after Trump and that their political future is likely to be a lot longer than that of the sitting second-term president. For all of those reasons, yes, we're still going to see plenty of disruption from the United States. We are certainly not going to see Trump accept negative outcomes from the midterms or potentially from 2028 elections. We'll see all sorts of continued efforts to undermine existing checks and balances, erode existing institutions, attacks on political opposition, more corruption from the executive, none of which is completely new, but still unprecedented in its scale and reach. Those things matter, but the constraints have become greater than the ability to undermine and to disrupt. And so in that regard, it's important to recognize what efforts have been made, what instability we've seen on the global stage, and how they actually play out. That's been true on global trade. That's been true now in Iran and the Middle East, and I expect it's going to be true in a whole bunch of other places too. Still, if you want to watch the places that are going to be most vulnerable to big change, I would say focus on the Donroe Doctrine, focus on Mexico, and a New Deal as the Americans push Sheinbaum hard against members of her own party, cabinet secretaries, and the rest, and undermine her sovereignty. Focus on Cuba, where Trump thinks he's going to get a big win, a la Venezuela. And there are real opportunities, but a very different political environment and approach than we've seen under any other president for the last 60 years. So it's not to say there won't be U.S.-driven instability. It's not to say that Trump won't continue to be someone to pay attention to and to change the nature of outcomes around the world, but to a more diminished degree than we've seen over the last year and a half. That's it for me, and I will talk to y'all real soon.